and a welcome to all of those attendees who took the time out to listen to these Toolbox Talks every Tuesday morning. We want to just thank you very much for the actual, not just the attendance that you give to us, but the information and communication that you've been submitting to us through the course of the weeks, the months, these past years that we've been doing these Toolbox Talks. We really do appreciate it, and we welcome any new members that have joined us for these Toolbox Talks to please do the same. Look out for the actual communication via email or WhatsApp. You'll get that information during the course of this Toolbox Talk or at the end of the Toolbox Talk. And then please get in contact with us should you have any information that you want to give to us. So you've heard it before. It's continually in our face about preventing COVID-19, but please do your part and ensure that you wash your hands, avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands, avoid close contact with people who are sick, cover your cough, and then always clean and disinfect frequently touched objects and surfaces. If you can and you've made a personal decision to get vaccinated, please do so and ensure that you try and do your utmost, even after that, to continually prevent COVID-19 spread. So this morning, we are going to look at heights as one of our Toolbox Talk topics. Heights is very, very dangerous situation in which many plumbers face themselves. And so during the course of November, rather not coming up for October, but rather for November, we will be looking at today working at heights and what are the dangers, what can you do to constantly bring down this risk. Obviously, the risk of working at heights is extremely dangerous for you as a plumber. But what is working at heights? Well, working at heights means any place where if precautions were not taken, a person could fall, either from a level to a lower level where we would normally walk, which is called ground level, or sometimes even into an excavation. So this is where the distance of fall is liable to cause personal injury to the person. In other words, you are working at heights if you work above ground or floor level. You could fall from an edge through an opening or fragile surface, or you could fall from ground level into an opening in a floor or a hole in the ground, such as trenches or excavations, as we mentioned. Now, many people do not understand that working at heights, first of all, needs to have a committed team that identifies what the risks and hazards actually are. And should the risk assessment say that the likelihood or the chances of falling and getting injured are fairly high, then something must be done. And we are not talking about generic safety management systems or generic training. We are talking about something substantial to, first of all, prevent the fall, if at all possible, starting with the eliminating of working at heights altogether. If that is possible, that is the best way to go. Now, you might say, well, how is it possible to eliminate working at heights? Well, for some out in the UK that wash windows, previously they used to use mobile elevated working platforms such as a cherry pick or a scissors lift, and they would take all of their tools to climb up onto step ladders, scaffolding, or scissors lifts and elevate themselves to the height of where they would need to work. And then they started designing poles that would attach to the actual window cleaning equipment that are telescopic. And so these boom or telescopic poles would then be able to stretch out a few meters up into the air, and that would eliminate the need to get to a certain height. Yes, we know that telescopic poles cannot reach further than a certain height. And so buildings that are higher than that would obviously then necessitate the need for some sort of scaffolding, ladder, or mobile elevated working platform. However, under a certain height, all working at heights was then eliminated. And you see, this then brought down the overall percentage of risks or injuries that happen while working at heights. Now, we do understand that at certain points or certain scopes of work that you perform as a plumber, you cannot eliminate working above the ground. But what we can do is limit the amount of time that we are working above the ground. Now, how do we do that? Well, one company, a plumber here out in Gauteng, used to install all the piping, the hydroboils or the geysers or whatever they were installing at heights, all at the same time. And so what would happen was they would set up their safe access, whether it would be a scaffold or a ladder, and then they would bring all the tools and equipment to that work area, and one person would pass it up to the person above. They would all get up to working at heights, and then they would do the full installation there. And this was a couple of hours each day on the project. When we were called out to do a fall protection plan for them, we realized that the amount of time that they were doing soldering or PVC pipe work, smaller little soldering or PVC pipe work that needed to be done, could actually be done on the lower level and then lifted up to the height. Now, this meant that a workspace needed to be created down on the floor first. All the works that could be done on the floor were done first and then lifted, and this reduced the amount of time that they were working at heights. Now, this is also effective because the likelihood of falling increases on the amount of time spent working at heights. If you're up there for an hour, it's more likely that you could fall within an hour as it is working for 20 minutes up on the height. So this consideration also needs to be looked at. But there's a few other considerations, things that we need to take a look at when working at heights, whether it be on a roof, a ladder, a scaffold, or a ceiling. The first question you want to ask yourself is, what is the scope of work and where am I going to be working? Do I need to climb onto the roof? Well, what type of access do you need once you are on the roof? What is the condition of the roof that you are climbing on? For a few of our clients, those being plumbers, you have to get onto normal houses, normal roofs on a house. But some houses have got parapet walls. They've got a flat roof, concreted in, or however they do their flat roofing. Sometimes they've got a wooden deck up there, and that's nice and easy to work on. Others have a very steep pitched roof with no guardrails, no lifelines, no points of attachment. And that is fairly dangerous compared to working on a flat roof with a parapet wall around you. And so a fall hazard, or the risk of falling to a lower level and causing this personal injury, is going to be different from site to site. Even the tasks you perform, such as installing geysers, hydroboils, many of you are going into the solar side, and you're probably doing a lot of solar panels on the roof and then diverting the lines or the water pipes through to the affected areas. All of this is going to be different on each site that you work on. So you need to identify where, first of all, you're going to be working. If it is a ladder, is it safe? If it's a scaffold, is it according to SANS? What type of scaffold do you actually need? If it's a ceiling, maybe take a look at the toolbox talk that we did earlier on ceilings. What do you need in order to provide safe access into a ceiling? What about once you're in the ceiling? Are you first doing a full site inspection to identify where the possibility is falling? See, it's not just climbing the ladder in and out of the ceiling that you could fall from, but even while you're in the ceiling, standing on potentially very soft material that you could fall through is also a fall risk. So inspect your workplace thoroughly. First, try and see where is there a possibility for you to fall from one level to another. Is it possible to fall through things? And is it possible for you to drop things to a lower level where others might be working? Now, all of these fall hazards result in what we call fall to a lower level or injury from working at heights. This type of risk is, I think, at the second highest incident and accidents rating for construction regulation, aside from your moving vehicles, your moving machinery that's crushing and bumping, because yellow machines or construction vehicles cause probably the highest fatalities. But working at heights is one of the highest for you as a plumber. So here are some known safety methods. Instead of using a ladder, is there a possibility to use a platform, such as a scaffold? You see, a scaffold allows you to have guardrails right around you. That prevents you from falling out of the scaffold. Then you can have a toe board that is attached at the bottom platform of the actual, or the bottom of the platform. This is about 150 centimeters, right around 150 millimeters rather, right around that platform. And this toe board stops tools and pieces of equipment from being kicked off of the platform and falling to a lower level. All of this has been designed to protect not only the person working on the platform or working at heights, as well as the employees working underneath, bystanders, visitors, employees, or even your own clients' employees that might be in and around that area. So these known safe methods are working for many companies. Do they work for you? Well, it depends. Are you implementing the correct safe method for the type of work that you are doing? Remember, it's not generic. It needs to be site specific as well as scope specific. And then if there's not a possibility of you stopping a fall, for instance, you cannot eliminate working at height, you cannot eliminate using a ladder. It's not practical to have a scaffold. It's not possible to have a mobile elevated working platform. The roof that you're on does not have a parapet. Well, then you need to invest in a good harness attached to a lanyard, which then attached to some sort of anchor point, either a lifeline or an anchor point that you have to self-create once you are on that elevated working platform. Now, while working within a harness, you can still fall. And you know that going through the training. Putting a harness on does not mean you cannot fall. It means you can fall, but it is going to stop you from hitting the ground. But a harness itself is still very dangerous. Aside from the 15 minutes that it takes to die if you are hanging inside a harness, especially if you are unconscious and cannot move around or do the bicycle method to keep your blood flowing, the harness always tends to get in the way of the employee. You see, sometimes it's under your feet or it doesn't allow you full access of movement. And so this type of fall protection is not actually the best type. It's actually the lowest form of fall protection. Now, it's still better than not having a harness. But if you could think of it this way, a safety harness with a shock absorbing lanyard are very similar to a safety belt and an airbag inside your vehicle. Now, we do not drive at speeds of 200, 180, 260 on the highway just because we have a safety belt and an airbag inside our vehicle. We do not rely on those two things in order to protect us in an accident. So we are not reckless while we drive. You see, there's a lot more other safe methods of using that vehicle to prevent ourselves from being injured in an accident. First of all, we try and use avoidance in an accident or potential accident. And this means that we are constantly aware of our surroundings. We operate our vehicle in a safe manner. We do not exceed the speed limit. We do not break the road rules. We do not drink while under the influence of any substances. All of this, keeping our car maintained, keeping the windscreen clean, making sure our headlights are visible while driving at night. All of these are better than just having a safety belt and an airbag. However, you still have to put your safety belt on, and you still rely on an airbag should an accident happen. But you are not designing your driving to rely solely on those two things. Now, next time you work at heights, are you relying solely on that safety belt and airbag? Are you relying only on the harness and the attachment that you're connecting to protect you in a fall? Well, then please remember, it will only protect you once you have the accident. In other words, you are saying you're okay to have the accident, your harness will protect you. Let's rather have a safe management system, a system of works that protects us before we have to fall. And this is really where you as employers and employees need to get together and figure out, where do you start? How do you go about ensuring that while you are working at heights, you are preventing the risk of falling, and not just falling, but falling to a lower level and being injured, perhaps even falling in a harness and having harness trauma or suspension trauma affect you as an employee? Well, start by performing a proper, adequate risk assessment of the work. This risk assessment will help you to understand what are the dangers, what can you be harmed by, what is the rating of risk, and is it sufficient for me to be able to say, I'm happy with that risk? And remember, don't let the risk assessor just do that for you. Make sure the employees are involved. And employees, don't wait for your employer to tell you what's in the risk assessment. It should be in your safety file. You should have access to this type of document. Read it, understand it, know the risks, know what the safe methods are, and understand what you can do to make it safer for yourself. Then read the method statements. How do you go about performing the work in the right method? Now, this is going to help with behavioral-based safety. You see, there's a certain way things get done in a company, isn't it so? There's a certain way that we do things, especially after a few years of doing it, or perhaps the way we learned it from someone else. And that's just the way we do things. Perhaps it's going to take a little bit of time from our side, a little bit of adjustment in our thinking or the way we work to change it to becoming more safely, or adjust it in order to make it safer for ourselves. Then have a look at your safe working procedure. What is the proper procedure for outlining the setting up of a ladder? The proper procedure to access a ladder or a scaffold? The proper procedure for connecting and working on a mobile elevated working platform? And what are your standard safe operating procedures? How do you operate a mobile elevated working platform? Or how do you operate some sort of tool, such as a drill or grinder, while working at heights? You see, it's not just the working at heights itself that we need to consider. It's the additional works that also need to be done while working at heights that we also need to ensure is done correctly. Then training, and we cannot stress this enough. You see, somebody said to us that you will never reach the height of your expectations. You will always fall to the level of your training. And that is very true when it comes to working at heights. When we get up there, our expectation is to be safe, but we will not always reach that if our training does not match our expectation. You will always fall to the level of training that you have received. And if that is nothing, well, then your fall is going to be severe. So depending on the scope of work and where you are working at heights, please ensure that the training is adequate to protect you as an employee. Now, many of you have gone through just basically working at heights training, harness awareness training. This is your unit standard 120362 from many safety companies, or your 22995 working at heights and rescue training from other companies. We suggest that you do your research into where you are doing the training. Identify whether the training or the manual that is being used adequately trains your staff on what you are currently doing. You see, training is very generic. We could train a manufacturer, we could train a plumber, an electrician, we could even train a corporate company who is doing IT work, installing servers, working on a ladder on the exact same unit standard, because the principles can be attached to all scopes of work. But as a facilitator and assessor, we do not understand your current specific scope of work or your site specific risks that you are going to face. And so over and above the training that you are sent out to do, once you receive that certificate, does this mean you're competent to work at heights? No, it means you're competent to understand working at heights in accordance with that unit standard. But you need on-site training, on-site supervision, continual professional development in that specific work. And this can only be done internally by you as a company, where your supervisors are constantly training through safety talks, toolbox talks, risk assessments, understanding the site-specific risks and also the scope-specific risks by using the training that you've gone on and then implementing it on site, or using the information that you've derived out of that specific unit standard and applying it to your specific risks. Then perhaps you need to look at working in a manhole, working in a confined space where there is also the fall risk, or working on a roof, perhaps with cat ladders. And you need to identify, how will you rescue someone should they fall? Now, if you are relying on a harness and a lanyard, then a rescue attempt is one of the most vital things that you need to plan for. Should someone fall and they are arrested in their fall with their lanyard and they are hanging in their harness, how are you going to get to them? How are you going to rescue them? And how are you going to get them down to a safe level for them either to be transported to the hospital or to get the necessary first aid? Identifying how you are going to do that, you will realize, is almost as difficult as planning the entire job. And that is because there are so many outcomes while you are working on that roof that you need to consider. And so we always say, if you are relying on a harness and a lanyard only, your work is cut out for you. You need to do additional work, additional rescue plans, additional emergency plans to ensure that, because you've relied on your safety belt and because you've relied on your airbag in that vehicle, you now need to identify, how are you going to protect yourself once you are in that accident? Job observation forms from management and supervisors are also very important to continually monitor and assess whether the employees are doing it according to the SAFE method risk assessment. Always reassess. If you are doing it safely now, is there getting it to a point where it is becoming mundane and certain things are being skipped over or overlooked? Perhaps we need to go back to PDCA. Plan, do, check, act. Once you've planned to do something and you've actually implemented it, check to see if it's effective. If it isn't, then always act on what you find as a weakness. Never underestimate how important it is that employees must be involved in their own training. Yes, you do get sent for training to other training providers. They do this type of training every single day. Perhaps it's monotonous for them. Perhaps it's monotonous for you, or just a fee that you need to pay that you feel is unnecessary. Well, get involved in doing your own internal training. If you are doing working at heights, why not include your specific standards in it? Go through the SACWA standards, take a look at your risk assessments, look at your own induction, your method statements, and the rescue plan. Once they've gone for their formal training, bring them in to your own company and do training on the specific risks and hazards that you are going to face. And I will be honest, there's no training company out there that doesn't issue you with a learner guide. So every company that I've been to issues you with a learner guide. Keep a copy of that learner guide and go through that information regularly. Don't wait for your certificate to expire before going for new training. Continually train, especially when it comes to working at heights, so that employees understand the dangers. If they do not understand the danger, they will not be prepared when it comes to an actual emergency should a fall occur. So the dangers are real, whether it is falling from heights or falling objects from heights. Every month around the world, employees are involved and are either injured or fatally wounded because of falling or falling objects. These things cause short-term and long-term injuries, paralysis, and death. It only takes a few moments to plan and prepare for the work that you are going to do. Don't let the rest of your life be affected by a few seconds of being unsafe. And remember, a fall from height can kill you. In fact, a lot of falls from height have led to long-term paralysis, people living in a paralyzed state for the rest of their life. So what does this mean for you as a plumber? Perhaps you are accessing that ceiling this coming week, going to go and do an inspection, an installation, or perhaps something very, very simple. Have you ensured that it is done safely? Have you allowed for hands-free working when you are working on a platform or working at heights inside a ceiling? Have you identified all the support structures and the necessary safe method of work. Please remember that there are specific requirements in terms of legislation, your general safety regulations, as well as your SAN standard for working at heights properly. So let's recap. The entire aim of having not just a fall protection plan, but having an entire safety management system is to prevent injury, prevent incidents, and prevent accidents. Now, regardless of what legislation covers you, you can make it safer. Legislation is the minimum requirement. You can go over and above that if you want to, if it means that you take your risk seriously. Even if it is not a requirement, can you still uphold the regulation? So even if you are working at a private home and it's not in construction, you don't need a full rescue kit and a full protection plan. Just because it doesn't apply to that specific work in terms of construction, can you apply the principles to that work so that you can still protect yourself adequately while working at height? Then some questions. Have you made a decisive plan for the type of work that you do? If there is a danger, is it covered in your risk assessment? Does the safe working procedure that you have cover the method for working safely? Is there any other practical way of keeping everyone safe? And what is your view of working at heights? We'll leave you with those questions and just show you these two pictures and ask you another question. Are you leaving your safety in the hands of someone else? And if that is the case and you are reliant on another person, well, you might be disappointed in the future. Safety management, the biggest flaw in that would be the reliance on someone else to keep you safe. So as an employee, don't wait for your employer to put something in place. Try and understand your risk and see if there's a way for you to get involved in your own safety. Remember, if you fall, you are the one that is injured. So let's take the safety thought for this week. Take 5 and stay alive. If you can take a few extra moments before starting your work and ensure that you have everything in place to keep yourself protected. Next week, we'll look at dust and why that is so important that we adhere to the safe working procedures, as well as what is the health impact later on if we are working in a dusty environment and we are not adequately protecting ourselves from it. Don't forget the compliance officers course, as well as the compliance awareness course that is available to you, and the 2 methods of getting into contact with us. That's the WhatsApp number, as well as our email address. Please don't forget the Man in the Van Education Through a Conversation podcast happening every Monday at 8 a.m. And then a final reminder to continually prevent COVID-19. Just a very big thank you to everybody that joined us this morning. We look forward to ending off the year safely. And so if you're getting ready to close out in the next month or so, please get in touch with us and let us know any safe methods that you are using in order to close out and wrap up your safety for the year. Perhaps we can assist you, or we can use your method to assist someone else. Thanks again and have a safe week.